What is going on, Bucs fans? Back from vacation. We are here on the Sick Podcast, Pirate Parlay with your host, JC Allen. We've got a great show for you tonight. We're going to get into training camp, which is just 2 weeks away, if you can believe it. The lull in the offseason is we're almost through with it. Obviously, we have, the draft and the combine and free agency and all that fun stuff, rookie mini camp. And then there's just like a month off where nobody's doing anything. You're trying to just scrounge up stories and stuff like that. But we're so close to training camp. And I can't wait to get back out there on the field, see some action, some pad smacking, some hitting. And we're going to talk about training camp tonight. We're going to get into a little bit of a training camp preview tonight. I've got my good friend Josh Queipo from Pewter Report. He will be on tonight, so we'll talk to him about some of his thoughts on some of these training camp battles. The wide receiver 3 spot, the left guard spot, nickel cornerback, some of these smaller ones that people might not be talking about, but that 5th, 6th wide receiver, what do they do? Roster construction, how do they figure this out with the new kickoff rules? All that stuff, we'll touch on that. And then next week, we've got a great show for you. We got Todd Bowles coming on. We got Liam Cohen coming on. It's going to be awesome. I can't wait to get into that with those guys. So sit tuned. We'll be right back after the break. I'll bring Josh in. We'll get right into it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Pirate Parlay.
Battle intercepted, picked off in the end zone. Bucs are going to beat the Chiefs. We're the champions of the world.
The sickest Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. It's going to be sick.
Back here on the other side. Guys, if you're in here, welcome in here. If you're new here, if you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube, appreciate you. If you have any comments, questions, feel free to chime in on the chat. We'll get you involved for sure. But without further ado, let me invite my guest on here. He is the capologist. He is the salary cap guru. He is a master of film breakdown. He's my good friend. You guys know him as Josh Queipo from Pewter Report. Josh, how are you? How's the offseason been treating you? Are you excited as the rest of us for real football to be back?
Oh, so excited, JC. So good to see you. Good to be back on the Sick Podcast. I remember, I believe I was your first guest on Pirate Parlay.
Right, you were.
And to see how much you've grown the channel, I think you're approaching 1,000 subscribers. I've seen a few of your videos, over 7,000 views. It's really awesome to see what you've grown this to.
Yeah, I'm excited to keep growing it too. We've got some awesome news coming up for the league year. So super excited about that. Tons of stuff going on, maybe some giveaways, things like that. Some really special, maybe weekly guests. It's going to be a lot of fun what we can do with this channel, but I need you guys to help grow it too. Like, subscribe, turn on the notifications, tell a friend. I mean, I am one of the only guys around here giving you consistent access to players and coaches on the Buccaneers, a team that you love. Tell people, show them here. This is the spot to be here at the Pirate Parlay Podcast. We're bringing it to you. We're bringing the heat. We're bringing the heat here. But speaking of the heat, it is hot out down in Tampa Bay. It is hot during training camp. We saw it affect some players during rookie mini camp and the OTAs. We saw a few of them throw up a couple times. But, Todd Bowles, one of his parting messages from rookie mini camp is make sure you're training in the heat. Don't go up in the cold and train and think you're going to come down here. It's going to be the same. So we'll see who listened to his advice and who's going to come back ready to go. But I can't wait for training camp, man. It's one of those times of the year where it's like football every single day. You got that access. You're watching these young players. You're watching this team building. You're watching guys develop, guys who you kind of point out from the offseason earlier on in the offseason, like, ooh, if this guy does well, he can maybe sneak a spot on. I'm excited to see some of these guys, some of the rookies, obviously, but some of the undrafted guys and the kind of just pickup guys. Cameron Johnson's a guy I'm excited to see. There's a bunch of different battles I think that are going to be going on too, whether they're high profile like the left guard and wide receiver 3, and also the nickel cornerback with them drafting Tyke and having Christian Izien. There's a lot of smaller battles that I'm excited about. Well, what are you most excited about for this training camp for the Buccaneers?
I think you actually touched on one of them. I'm a huge Tyke Smith fan. I think that he was my favorite draft pick that the Bucs had this past draft. I don't think he's necessarily the best. I mean, Graham Barton, I was really, really high on and felt like I was kind of early on him too. but Tyke, just for where they got him.
No. We're not gonna scoot past that. You were early. You were the first person in Tampa Bay to have Graham Barton in a Bucs mock draft. Don't just slide over that like it's no big deal. You were before the national guys. You were before everybody. The first person to have Graham Barton going to the Bucs.
He was the second guy evaluated in that draft class. So first guy evaluated was like, I want to say it was over Black Friday weekend, was Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon. And then Graham Barton was the second guy evaluated, I want to say in like early January or something like that. I don't think the college football playoff season was over. And I just really liked what I saw. And I was excited to see him at Senior Bowl. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it. I think he was cleaning up a lower body injury and just wasn't available. So I really enjoyed Barton. But Tyke Smith was like my favorite pick when you look at like where the Bucs drafted him relative to like where I thought he was my number one safety. Even though I really see him more as kind of like a nickel first Swiss Army knife, if you will. Right. A good friend of mine, Marcus Whitman, he's known on YouTube as that franchise guy, kind of started in the Madden community, but does a ton of tape breakdowns. He compared Tyke to Antoine Winfield Jr., and Marcus had Antoine Winfield Jr. as like his 10th best prospect in that year's draft. So kind of lends some credibility to his process and whatnot. Yeah.
You did have the Bucs ranked 23rd, so take it as you will. But
well, I was saying lending credibility to Marcus's evaluation. You can say I'm an idiot all you want.
No, I'm saying Marcus. You know, he's credible in that area, but you got to take a little bit away with his 23rd ranking of the Bucs in the NFL. Like, what are we doing, Marcus? You had Trey on. What are you doing?
I thought he was a little low myself, but I think most Bucs fans would say I'm a hater. I probably have them around 17th to 19th myself, so
that's fine. I think that's
okay.
Middle of the pack is fine. I think if you've got anywhere between 14 and 17, I think you're right on the money there. Anything higher than that, I think maybe you've been taking some gummies like the dude on the Rich Eisen show. And anything less than that, you're seriously sleeping.
We're gonna go game by game. Nope, they're going 17-0, winning the Super Bowl. I want the team to hear me. Long pause. That guy
it was great.
Phenomenally funny. So yeah, I love Tyke. I think that, and I think this kind of dives into the topic that you wanted to talk about today. I would be shocked if he didn't come out of camp as the starting nickel over Chris Izien. I know somebody suggested that on Twitter, and I love the mentality of a Christian Izien, like quote tweeting the guy with a bunch of laughing emojis, like it's my job, nobody's taking it from me. A true undrafted free agent mentality. But I think what Tyke brings in terms of his physicality and how well he works up at the line of scrimmage and his ability, his instincts and everything like that, I just think that there's a huge upside that Christian Izien just doesn't provide the team with a similar floor. So I'm really excited to see Tyke. I think I had him as kind of like a surprise Pro Bowler or something like that for a recent Pewter Report roundtable. I'm just very high on him. He's probably my favorite player to get to see in live reps.
So let's start there then. We're going to start at wide receiver, but let's start at nickel cornerback because I think Tyke has a chance. And if you guys are just tuning in, this is Sick Podcast, Pirate Parlay here on the Sick Podcast Network. I'm your host, JC Allen. We've got Josh Queipo from Pewter Report talking about training camp battles and whatnot, who we're excited to see. But I think when you look at the competition between Izien and Tyke, I think a lot of times we're just kind of throwing out Javier Thomas. Like he doesn't have a chance to maybe make some noise in this competition as well. But with Tyke, I think he provides such a unique skill set, right? And watching him at mini camp, second day at rookie camp, he makes an interception. You watch him during mini camp, he's in the backfield in a blitz getting a would-be sack. I think they can use him in such a variety of ways that he might be better suited to start the season. I think it's like a Swiss Army knife that kind of Bowles can employ in different scenarios. Now, of course, he's got a full training camp to prove that he can handle it and go out there. I mean, he's going to have some battles to go against in training camp. especially when they do some of these joint practices. They get the chance to cover Tyreek Hill when he lines up in the slot and some of these different guys. So we'll get to see his full range and his ability and what he can do, these one-on-one matchups and stuff like that. But, I think it's going to be a closely contested battle. And sometimes Bowles has no, reservations playing rookies. No reservations. He'll definitely throw young guys.
The last couple of years,
right? He'll throw young guys into the fire and say, "Hey, sink or swim." But I think there's an opportunity. I think Christian kind of knows what's expected of him, and I think there's a chance for him to grow. Now, I think Queipo probably has the higher ceiling as a player. Definitely, I think more talented. One was drafted in the 3rd round, had some 2nd round buzz on him. One was undrafted. But I think, coming out of training camp, I wouldn't be surprised if Izien held on to that role for the first couple of games, but I wouldn't be surprised if Queipo took it over too. When you look at him coming into this offense, it's a very similar offense to what defense, rather. It's a very similar defense to what they ran at Georgia. And I talked to Jordan Whitehead, and I got an article out over at Bucs Game Day from a couple weeks back. And he said, his ability to just pick it up so quickly and kind of know, like, I was talking to Jordan's like, he knew things that I didn't know until 2 years ago. Like, he's like, I'm watching his film when he's coming out, when we drafted him, I'm like, he's picking up on things and doing things that took me a couple years in the league to figure out how to do. So I think there's very high upside with him as a starting nickel cornerback, but even as a guy who can be deployed at safety, a guy who can be deployed at big linebacker in certain dime packages. And there's a lot of well-roundedness to his game. I just wonder how quickly it's like you go with the unknown, or go with the thing And I guess with a lot of young pieces kind of taking that next step on this team with the Yaya, with maybe a potential Chris Braswell, Clyde Cansey, Zion McCollum, if Todd decides to say, all right, well, let's go with someone we know can do the job and let him earn those reps over him at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, but at the same time, I think there's a very real ceiling with Izien. From what I watched last year, just kind of going back throughout the tape, it's interesting that you say, he kind of knows it, because there were so many times where you can see pre-snap, Izien's looking around, he's like, there's a failure to communicate there or over communicate, but it just didn't seem like he was really sure of how he was supposed to play a certain formation.
Ryan Neal communicating to him a lot, though.
What's that?
Said he had Ryan Neal being the one to communicate to him a lot.
I appreciate you bringing that up. That was one of my bigger misses.
Got to take a shot at him anytime I can. Man, that was terrible. The one game he was at linebacker was his best game all season. Continue. Sorry.
He was very good in that one. Well, better than his normal play. But just there were blown coverages. Like, I don't know if he's necessarily got that leg up. And it's interesting because he had 2 interceptions in the first 2 weeks, right, which created this narrative around Chris Izien that, he's this diamond in the rough. He's this, star who should have been drafted. If you were to take those 2 games out, what's necessarily the narrative around Chris Izien? What's the thought in terms of his play? I think it changes quite a bit. And it's those couple of splash plays and this kind of playing games with different endpoints. But because it just so happened that they occurred in the first 2 weeks of the season, it kind of created this, like I said, a narrative around him that he rode through the season. Do you know how many pass breakups he had after week 2?
It wasn't many.
It was 0.
Oh, gee, shit.
Yeah. So you take that and like I said, I'm very high on Queipo, so I expect him to win that battle. Either way, I think you'll see both players on the field at different times. They're different skill sets, so if both end up on the 53-man roster, I think you could see Bowles maybe play matchups from week to week. This week, it's a more physical kind of power slot receiver we're going up against. That's going to be more of a Queipo matchup.
Right.
This week we're going up against kind of a smaller, shiftier guy. Maybe that's more of a Chris Izien. So
Right.
I think that you could see them kind of rotated that way, but I think long-term it's Tyke Smith's job.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge point there. I think matchup dependent, right? And Bowles loves to have a array of guys that are versatile enough that he can play in different ways. So if you have, if you do have that smaller, shiftier guy, then that's where you got Christian Izien. But now you can use Tyke Smith in different ways, is coming off as a blitzer or certain packages and things like that. And I think Bowles is going to love having a guy like Tyke because of the versatility that he can say, Izzy, and you go and you're going to be the nickel, and Tyke, you're just going to play the ball, like either make plays on the ball, whether that's going after the quarterback on certain play calls, whether that's being able to, play coverage, anything like that. He I think you can see it already. He's got ball skills for sure. You saw it throughout college as well. So I think it gives them a lot of flexibility on that defensive backfield, that when you got Winfield back there, you got Whitehead back there, you got Dean. I have high hopes for Zion McCollum as
Very
well.
high on Zion, yeah.
I think he's going to have an outstanding season. Just talking to him too, the work he's been putting in. He hasn't stopped working just because they had time off. He's been still grinding. So I think that young secondary with the addition of Tyke Smith and the re-addition of Jordan Whitehead is going to be a very solid group for Bowles. But you kind of touched on something too there with, all right, Izien or Tyke, matchup dependent, right? Okay, this week we need this week we need that. To me, I feel like that's the way this wide receiver 3 competition is going to end up going, because I think they both bring different things to the table. I think when you look at what Jalen McMillan does, he's got some of that inside-outside versatility. He really knows how to find the open spot in zone. He's a very sure route runner with very strong hands, and I think that probably gives him the edge, even though Palmer has been in the system for a year, and he's a lot of people's favorites. Similar scheme, I should say, but same organization. But I think when you look at Trey, okay, you've got that game-changing speed. There's packages for him that are going to be implied too. And, based on what cornerback you might face or what team you're going up against, I see a lot of interchangeability between the two. Now, I think Jalen McMillan probably wins it. Your number, pseudo starter number 3. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for Trey Palmer too. I don't think he's the 3 and Palmer just kind of gets scraps. I think if you look at the end of the year, I think it would be a lot closer to a 60-40 split more than a 70-30 or so. What are your thoughts?
This is one where I buck the trend. I don't think Jalen McMillan brings a skill set that is unique to the room. I know you said he has strong hands, and if I remember camp diaries from yourself and from the guys at Pewter Report, there was a catch he made early on in OTAs where he displayed strong hands. And I think that's created this narrative. But if you look at his career at Washington, he's never been a contested catch guy. I don't necessarily think he has the strongest hands. I didn't really see it in the tape that I watched on him last year. There were other receivers who had higher than him when the Bucs selected him. I don't think he has a lot of play strength, which is part of the reason why I worry about him playing the Z, in this offense with Chris Godwin being to the F role. I worry about his ability to get up press coverage. So for me, I think Trey Palmer is the better option for wide receiver 3. I think as he brings an element that nobody else on this team has, which is game-changing speed. He's a 4.3 guy, and you see it on tape. Like, he's fast. And again, you look at just small changes to last year, which could have created whole different narratives around players. The Detroit game, I think it was week 5. Trey Palmer busted the Detroit defense 3 or 4 times deep, and Baker just couldn't find him. There was one where he, I think it was a deep out, might have been an over a dig route where the throw wasn't wonderful, but he should have caught it and he dropped it. But there were, I want to say, at least 4 plays that the two of them should have hooked up on where he legit just beat the defense. It could have been a 200-yard game. I think he ended up with like 60-something yards anyway, but it could have been an over 200-yard game. That happens, and what do we think of Trey Palmer entering 2024? It's probably, yeah, we drafted, the Bucs drafted Jalen McMillan, but that's Trey Palmer's job to lose, right?
Right.
Just because Baker couldn't find him on most of those throws doesn't change the fact that the guy's actually, he brings an element nobody else has. Yes, Mike Evans is a very good deep receiver, but he doesn't win in the same way that Trey Palmer wins just by blowing the top off. And Jalen McMillan's not a speedster. Chris Godwin at this point in his season, in his career, his athleticism is waning.
Trouble separating.
So who's going to provide that threat downfield? So for me, I think that, the team's best bet based on the tape that I've watched is for Trey Palmer to be 3, and then Jalen McMillan can spell Palmer and Godwin as the backup Z and F receiver. So that's kind of my take on it. I know that I'm a little far out compared to most people. I want to say Greg Cosell recently was very high on Jalen McMillan, thinks he's going to be phenomenal. I still think that Trey Palmer is really the 3rd best receiver on this roster right now.
Yeah, and I can definitely agree with you. I mean, when you look at what I wrote about McMillan, some of his weaknesses still needs to show he can hold up against more physical corners, and will need to prove he can stretch routes vertically consistently. But again, it's one of those things where, right, if you're looking at the roster and you're saying, okay, we've got Chris Godwin, who's a target monster in the slot. We've got Mike Evans, who can do it all on the outside. And then what is this offensive lacking? You can point to speed, right? There's not a burner. There's not a speedster guy there. And I mean, you've studied the Rams offense closely. And, they have a version of that, maybe, I guess, in Tutu Atwell, a guy who can kind of turn the Jets on a little bit. But it's going to be interesting. But like I said, I even wrote my wide receiver preview today. I don't think it's going to be a very high split. I think that whoever wins this 3 pseudo starter is going to see their fair share of snaps too. I don't think it's like, all right, one of them's on the shelf and that's it. I think they're going to be a pretty clear and concise rotation between those 3 guys, depending on what defensive looks are giving you, what you need at that point in the game, and where they're, what their offense calls for at that time. One thing I like about Cohen, it's players over players, right? So if you need a player with speed, Palmer's going in because he's the player. Doesn't matter what you got on your call sheet. You need to take a long shot. He's the guy that's going to go in there. So if you guys are just tuning in now, you're watching the Pirate Parlay here on the Sick Podcast Network. I'm your host, JC Allen, here with Josh Queipo of Pewter Report, talking about training camp battles. We covered the nickel cornerback. We covered the wide receiver 3. If you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, drop them in here. I see we got some people on Twitter and YouTube. Drop them in here. We'll get to them. We'll take your questions for sure. We'll talk about them and any concerns about the season. Training camp is about a week and a half away. I can't wait to get back out there. We're officially actually 12 days away. Rookies report on the 22nd. Veterans report on the 23rd, and we're out there on the 24th. So 14 days away till we're reporting on it, 12 days away till they report themselves. Super excited for that. Let's talk about another position in the offense. That's the offensive line. Obviously, last year our left guard play was not adequate at all. They signed Matt Filer, former Chargers guy and Pittsburgh guy, to kind of hopefully fill that void. It didn't look great the first couple of weeks. Then he went down with an injury. They went with Aaron Stinney, stuck with Aaron Stinney. You were calling for Filer towards the end of the season because of how bad Stinney played. They did not go to him. And really kind of it threw off the entire offensive line, I feel like. The running game, etc., just kind of struggled to get through until the end of the season, where they finally started to kind of click and get what they're supposed to be doing. And you saw the running game improve dramatically compared to the first part of the season over the last several games of the year. So left guard is a very important spot. They obviously nailed down one spot in the draft. Graham Barton, as we spoke about. So you've got Graham Barton at one spot, and now you have another guy here, and I, I'm sorry, I don't know where that's coming from. You have Graham Barton, holding down that center spot. Likely, he's got to beat out Robert Hainsey, or he moves over to left guard, and left guard's solved. But Ben Bredesen from the Giants, Sue Opeta from the Eagles. Let's get into this. Which one? Obviously, it looks like Ben Bredesen has had more time with the first team unit. Which of these guys are you more inclined to say wins this battle? Obviously, both of them, their track record hasn't been great. You look at kind of Ben Bredesen, his career grades over with the New York Giants. Offensive grades have been kind of dismal. Last year, 42.1 offensive grade, 41.4 run block, 42.4. Now he did play left guard, center, left guard, right guard, left guard, center like all season long. And Sue Opeta, he had about 6 starts last year, 53.2 offensive, 50.5 run block, 57.9 pass block. So not numbers that jump out at you. Is this more of a Band-Aid situation again? Let's try to get through this year with some guys, or do you think one of these guys can step up and actually become a good player for them? And which one is it going to be?
Yeah, I think both are good depth signings. I don't like either one for starter role. There's, when Graham Barton was drafted, I was calling for the Bucs to put him at left guard, let Robert Hainsey be the starting center again this year, because while I don't think Robert Hainsey is a phenomenal center, I think he's an adequate one, and I think him at center is better than either Opeta or Bredesen as left guard. So you want to get your best 5 out there. Then, that includes Robert Hainsey, and I don't see Hainsey being a better guard than he is a center. And I think Graham Barton can be a very good guard or center. So that was kind of my take on it. If you look at the Bucs, just from financially, it looks like they believe Bredesen's the starter. He got a $3 million deal. Opeta's was, I want to say, for $1.3 million.
Yeah, it was like veteran minimum type number.
Yeah, wasn't very much. So for me, I think it depends on what the Bucs want from their run game. If they want more of a power gap duo run game, I think Opeta is the better option.
Right.
If they want to run more of a zone, mid zone, wide zone, outside zone, even an inside zone, I think Bredesen's probably the better option for that. I'm trying to see if their PFF blocking grades line up with that analysis. I'm trying to pull their gap and zone blocking grades, but yeah, I'm not in love with either option. I think that there are still there's still one player on the free agent market I would love to see the Bucs kind of pursue, and that is he played
Connor Williams.
Connor Williams, he was with the Dolphins last year.
I know who you're talking about. I've seen you shout it from the rooftops.
Apparently not that loud, but since I forgot his name just that quickly. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not a big fan of either. Offensive line it's a weak link system. Your weakest link can quickly kind of torch the whole line. I think Bucs fans know that from 2022 and what Luke Gedeke was at left guard, wasn't great. So that's kind of my take on it. I guess I like Opeta a little bit better than Bredesen personally, but it's kind of 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other for me.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, Bredesen is a guy. I mean, traditionally, you look at this system that the Shanahan McVay system, it's more of that wide zone, mid zone, inside zone, a little bit outside zone type of run stuff that they like to do. And I think, there's some hype about Bucky Irving, right? And can he be the guy to, he's not big in stature, but can he run up the middle and break tackles and stuff like that. And I still don't think they have that guy on there for those traditional like power runs, and they don't have a power back to run some of those power runs up the gut. And I don't think with its Barton, Mock, or one of these guys, I don't think you've got the interior equipped to really run power a lot up the middle. Maybe to the outside where you get some of your guys in space, some pulling and stuff like that, some outside power runs maybe. But I think for what they're looking for is that mid zone, outside, inside zone type deal. And I think Bredesen, as you mentioned, is probably a better fit for that. That's why he's been getting the first team reps. I think
I'm not so sure of that, JC, to be honest with you. If you look at Liam Cohen, one of the things that I'm probably most excited about is, yes, he technically comes from a Shanahan scheme, but Shanahan's been moving away from that inside zone, mid zone scheme over the last couple of years. He's been doing a lot more duo. And looking at Liam Cohen at Kentucky, you see a huge variety in the run game. You see duo, you see pin and pull, you see wrap, you see counter, you do see inside zone, mid zone, and things like that. But I don't know if it's going to be this mid zone, outside zone, wide zone kind of heavy look.
Just from my conversations with a couple of guys on the team, that's kind of, I think that's going to be a majority of their runs. They'll definitely sprinkle in every type of situation there. But a majority of what they're going to do is going to look like that. I think when you kind of look at what the offense, at least the running game, is going to be like, they've been watching a lot of what Todd Gurley did early on. So, I mean, kind of what they were doing out there with the Rams in that time period when he was out there. I think they're going to be doing a lot of that stuff. But I definitely think there's going to be a lot of duo, a lot of push-pull, a lot of, pin. A lot of this stuff is all going to be in the playbook. All of these things are going to be available at their exposure. And I think that was part of the reason Klein was so attracted to them in the 6th round, because he wasn't just in one scheme. He was at in UTEP, I think it was, where they were running multiple different things. And, I was just kind of talking to him, he taught himself zone, he taught himself these things, and having that flexibility to, if shit hits the fan and he needs to go in there, he's not going to be a deer in his headlights when they say, hey, do this for the first time in an NFL game. He has that experience in college. So I think it's Bredesen's job to lose right now, but I think they like the size that Opeta brings. He's certainly going to get some time. I mean, I don't think this is a set it and forget it like we saw last year with Dave when he said, okay, this is going to be our 5 and we're going to run through this 5 the whole time. I think we'll see through training camp, at least for the first couple of weeks, Opeta and Bredesen continue to split those first team reps. I wouldn't be surprised to see Hainsey still get some first team reps too, because I'm in agreement with you. I think the best version of this offensive line is Hainsey at center, Barton at left guard, and the rest fall in place how it was last year. But we'll see what happens and what turns out.
Yeah. Just to kind of follow up on what I said earlier. So this is just last year. In Pro Football Focus's grading for gap runs, things like duo and power and things like that, Opeta had a 49.3 grade, which is not good. Bredesen had a 28.9 grade, which is horrendous. You look over at their zone blocking, it is a bit of a reverse there, where Bredesen had a 61.6 grade, which is basically means he was average. And then Opeta was 53.5. So kind of bears that out. I think if you look at 2022, it may not be quite as cut and dry. I think Bredesen actually had a better 2022 for both schemes. But in general,
because he wasn't playing 3 different positions every other game.
That might be it.
That has something to do with it too. I mean, I'm not saying Bredesen is great, but
one of the things to keep in mind though, that I think gives Bredesen a leg up is Opeta wasn't great playing next to very good players in a very good blocking scheme, at least from a run game standpoint. Philly has over the last several years been great offensive lines, good coaching, in terms of their blocking. And Opeta still wasn't able to really show that he was above average or worthy of being a starter. Bredesen was up and down last year. There were a couple games I graded out that he did well. And that was amidst a train wreck of an offensive line. And they they got rid of their offensive line coach. They're going with a completely new guy. So I think there's something to be said for that. Opeta kind of started on second base and failed to score. Bredesen had to start at, home plate and move around the diamond.
All right, you look at the Eagles too. I mean, he didn't sign for much. 1.3, I think maybe only like 900,000 was guaranteed with Opeta, and they lost obviously Travis Kelce. I think they lost their other guard too, Sumulata Zubupo.
I know I can't pronounce his name either, so I'm not going to try. But they had an internal option.
They had some internal options, but the fact that they said, all right, this is a guy that started 6 games for us last year, and we'll give him 1.5 and he'll stick around potentially, kind of, is a little bit eye-opening too. But I think they're going to be in the same spot as they were last year. I think if you look at them, if hopefully Bredesen's better than Filer was, but if not, I think with Opeta, you're getting a Stinney level replacement. I think, it's kind of what they're at. But I think Bredesen is probably going to be the guy who wins it out. Graham Barton wins that center spot. And I think that's what you're looking at to end up starting the season.
I would probably agree with that.
Couple rapid fire, then we'll wrap this up here.
We're doing the quarterback battle.
Well, no, we're not touching on the Trask versus Baker. That was last year. You're still last year, Josh. We can touch on Trask Wolford, though. I mean, do they keep 2 quarterbacks on this roster? Is Trask over Wolford? Wolford has experience working with Liam in the same system that he's bringing in here when he was in LA. Obviously, he has suitors out there, was almost poached by the Rams last year, decided he wanted to stay in Tampa. They gave him a raise, bumped him up to the active roster. Do they keep 2 quarterbacks? Do they keep 3 quarterbacks? What do they do?
I think they just adjusted the 3rd quarterback rule, didn't they?
They did to an extent, but at the same time, like, do you keep them on the roster? You keep them on the practice squad?
But I'm trying to remember if I say you probably keep Wolford on the practice squad. And the reason is that last year they had him on. The Rams did almost poach him, but he just wanted to stay in Tampa Bay. And then the Bucs at that point said, all right, we'll promote you to the roster. So I think initially for the 53-man cut down, I say Wolford is practice squad.
I agree there. Let's jump to running back 4 ? Okay. All right. Because I think there's some in the boat that think Sean Tucker's cut and dry to make this team. But if you look at what they did last year, they only had 3 running backs on the active roster. And they only had 1 on the practice squad. After they cut Keyshawn Vaughn, they only had Patrick Laird on the practice squad. So Sean Tucker, do you think he is running back RB4? Do you think he moves to the practice squad? They got Ramon Jefferson and DJ Williams on. I liked what I've seen out of Ramon Jefferson, but I don't know. Or do you think the Bucs run with 3 running backs to start the season?
I think they start with 3, because I think you can stash a couple guys to move into that running back 2 or 3 role if need be on the practice squad. I don't think Sean Tucker has RB4 locked up. I don't think Sean Tucker has a practice squad spot locked up. Right. I think he was very underwhelming last year. The Bucs brass has been quick to challenge him when we in the media have asked them about it. I remember being at the NFL Combine, we brought up Sean Tucker, and I want to say it might have just been Jason Light, but it might have been Todd as well, where they said, he's going to have to step up. All right. So where last year, I think there was a lot of hype around him because I think a lot of analysts had him at the draftable grade before his heart condition popped up during the pre-draft process.
Yeah, like 4th, 5th round, yeah.
Yeah, then becomes an undrafted free agent. The Bucs sign him. I think they gave him a decent amount of money on the guaranteed side. There's a lot of hype, especially for a running back room that's been lackluster over the last few years. And he just didn't show it in preseason. Just wasn't there. I think out of the gate, I think you were the one who broke it, right? He was RB2.
Yeah.
He was RB2
for 4 games, and then he was never to be seen again.
And off the roster, right? Not off the roster, but
just inactive for the rest of the season,
field,
pretty
right?
much.
So I think Sean Tucker doesn't have a damn thing locked up, and he's going to have to work his ass off to make the team and potentially even just make the practice squad.
Yeah, Sean Tucker needs to just spend this entire offseason, if he hasn't already, blocking. Just have someone run at you 10 times bigger than you at full force and just show the effort and willingness to block and know well, obviously getting into the playbook and knowing, your call, but you got to be able to show that you can be effective when you're being protective. And last year he couldn't do that, and he was off to the inactive. He went. Tight end 3, question mark 4. Obviously, I think Payne is set. You hear a lot of praise from him. Jason was on you guys' podcast, called out Payne Durham as someone he's most excited to see. Cade's not going anywhere. Keefe, Devin Culp. Do they keep 4, tight end 3, 4, or is it Keefe's spot to lose?
I think special teams will tell a lot about who wins that job. If you're looking at just contributions on offense, I would say give me Devin Culp, because there's upside as a receiver, as a move tight end. There's some dynamism from him in terms of his athletic profile and his speed. Keefe gives you nothing as a receiver, and while he's been labeled a plus blocker, he's been more of an inconsistent blocker, if anything.
Right.
I don't think he's necessarily been this high-end blocker that's earned a roster spot. But tight end 3 isn't going to come down to what your offensive contributions are. Tight end 3 is going to come down to what you can do on special teams. Keefe, he logged a ton of special teams reps last year.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
I think he was the second most or third most on the team.
It was a ton. And he was on multiple different
led the team 2 years ago, his rookie season in tackles.
Yeah, 276 snaps as a special teamer, 72 on kick return, 76 on kick coverage, 67 on punt coverage, and 61 on field goals. He had 5 tackles last year. So he brings a ton of value in an area of the game that most fans don't think about, outside of kickers, punters, and returners. So Culp is going to have to outshine Keefe as a special teamer to win that job over him.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you look at, kind of just moving into that, yeah, it's all special teams for that position. And again, that's why I'm excited to see roster construction, right? What is this new kickoff? What kind of bodies are they looking for on here? And I think that kind of leads into the next battle I'm kind of looking at is inside linebacker. And again, this is all based on roster construction. I think when you look at this front 7 on defense, what type of player are they looking for to contribute on special teams? And we'll kind of lump these 3 positions together, I guess. With defensive line, last year they carried 6. Mike Green was a 6th lineman. I think Judge Culpepper has impressed enough where there might be a spot for him to maybe leapfrog him. I think when you're looking at this outside linebacker room, you've got a bunch of guys here: Marquise Watts, Jose Ramirez taking those next step. Randy Gregory's been AWOL, but they invested at draft pick in Chris Braswell. And then at linebacker, you got KJ Britt stepping in for Devin White as he did last year. Servassier Dennis waiting in the wings, drafted him in the 5th round last year. More of a like a Levante type linebacker replacement, I think, than what you'd want, playing the Mike position. And then you got JJ Russell as well. And then Kalen DeLoach. So when you look at how the roster shakes out, I think your immediate thoughts on how many they carry, and we'll end with this, how many they carry at each position. Do they go with 6 on defensive line? Is it more 5? Are they carrying 5 or 6 edge rushers? Are they carrying 4 or 5? Last year they carried 5 linebackers. Do you see them doing that again? I think they carried 5 linebackers, 5 edge rushers, and 6 defensive linemen last year. So
yeah, I'm trying to kind of go through it in my head. I know you've made the case to me off camera that they go with 5 inside linebackers. I'm just trying to. So if they go with 2 quarterbacks and 3 running backs, that's 5. 6 receivers would make 11. Possibly 4 tight ends is 15. 9 offensive linemen gets you to 24. 3 special teamers puts you at 27. 10 defensive linemen gets you to 37.
10 defensive backs.
Yeah, that's 47. So you're left with 6 guys. That gives you that extra defensive line position and 5 linebackers. Yeah, I think you made the case for it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And that's with 4 tight ends instead of 3 tight ends. So I think there's a lot to
may go
play
3
with.
tight ends because they're more of an 11 personnel team this year. So that gives even one more spot to the defense that could be used on like an extra defensive back to give them 11 and potentially carry Izzy in as a safety and still get Tavier Thomas and Tyke Smith in as nickels, or,
Yeah.
Izzy in as nickel and Tyke as an extra safety. So yeah, I could see that. I think that there's a lot. I'm excited to see what these young linebackers have, because Servassier Dennis got like 1 start last year, looked pretty good in it. KJ Britt looked better than anybody thought they would, although years of watching Devin White will make a good floor player look amazing.
And JJ Russell too. He had that 1 start against the Colts.
His one game, against the Colts. So you had a lot of guys kind of fill in and all played pretty well when they were given that chance. It's just very small sample sizes. And then you add in Kalen DeLoach from Florida State,
who I think would factor very well in on that new special teams rules as a bigger body who can run.
Yep, it's a lot of uncertainty, but a lot of possibilities there.
Right.
I'm hopeful for Servassier to get on the field more this year.
Right.
I liked him coming out of Pitt, and I'm high on JJ Russell too. So I know a lot of guys are big on Kalen DeLoach. I haven't had a chance to watch him, to be completely honest. Right. So I just reserving judgment there. And then that just for my fiance's sake, she's a App State alum. The corner Funderburk.
He's been making plays, man. He's a good kid too, humble, man.
I can only find one game of all 22 from him, and not that he played poorly, he didn't play well. There wasn't anything that kind of stood out. And I was trying to find other games of him, and I just had the one. So to hear that he's been showing out in practice, I'm personally, as a media member, I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm personally rooting for him to make the roster, simply because my fiance is a Mountaineer, and I would love to give her a reason to watch the games with me.
Bro, I have personally rooted for players and failed, so I haven't picked one yet because I'm like the curse. Jose Borregales, Nolan Turner, Javon Hagan. I pick a guy.
Stay away from Thunderbird.
What's the running back from last year? Ronnie Brown.
Ronnie Brown. You were so high on Ronnie Brown. Your
days are numbered. He's not even in the league right now. He's not even in AFL, USFL, man. So yeah, I don't know if I should pick some guy or I should pick some guy I think has no chance. So I can look like a hero this year. But Josh, thank you so much for coming on. We definitely appreciate your time. Everyone that's watching, I appreciate you. Like, subscribe, turn the notifications on. Next time, comment. We only got one comment in here. We'll have to answer your questions live for sure. Tell a friend. Let's get some more people in here. We got Liam Cohen, Top Bowls next week. 2 episodes. It's going to be a lot of fun, guys, right before the week before training camp. So I'm super excited. And it's going to keep going. I've got a bunch of guys ready to go. Huge things planned for this fall and this upcoming season. So definitely, spread the word about Pirate Parlay here. We're doing some big things and even bigger things. It's a very exciting time to be me. Exciting time. It's where things coming up, and to be someone who's interested in Bucs content, because there's so much good stuff out there. I'll actually be jumping over to Sports Illustrated to hear the Cannons in about 12 minutes. So we'll be talking about some more training camp battles and information. So definitely pop over there. Josh,
guys, I said hi.
I definitely will. Josh, feel free to promote yourself. What do you got going on? I know you got something in the works. I don't know if I can say anything about it yet.
But no, nothing in terms of deals or anything like that. I'm continuing to write over at Pewter Report. I think the big thing I'm working on right now is I've been doing a series of ranking the NFC South by position groups. I'm not
ever.
It's a long summer. So every Wednesday I do a new position group. So Edge, if it's not out already, it will be out a little bit later this evening. Did defensive tackle last week. Next week, we'll be moving to inside linebacker. We did start with offense, so we're getting close to the end. We'll finish up with special teams and coaching, and then I'll kind of do a overall team grades article to cap it off. Kind of outside of that, my business partner and I, for more national stuff, we've been working on kind of starting to look at the 2025 off season in terms of contract projections across the NFL. Last year we wrote for A to Z on that. We did a top 105 and followed that up with 32 kind of extension candidates. We're hoping that continues into the fall, where we'll do maybe guys who have been in the league for 2 years. 2024 will be their third year. What could an extension at the end of that season look like for some of those first round picks? So a few things in the works. Trying to continue to develop a stat for evaluating running backs that Bucky Irving kind of inspired me to write about, which is yards after contact over expected and missed tackle force rate over expected. And I've been writing a little bit about that on my Substack. So you can find me there. It's the NFL According to Q. So I think those are the main things that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, if you're into all that nerdlytics, then Josh Q is you're a man. You're a man for sure. Josh, I appreciate your time so much, man. You're like a brother to me. I really do appreciate you and love you like a brother. So thanks for popping on. We'll get you back on at some point during the season. We will. But yeah, thanks a lot, man. Go check out all his stuff. He's doing amazing stuff right now. Again, please like, subscribe, turn on notifications, tell a friend. We've got great shows for you coming up next week and all throughout the season. So excited to do that. Vacation's over. We're back on the grind now. We're back at it. That's going to do it for us, though. Previewing training camp. We'll be back next week. 2 shows, new shows, more shows. We're doing it. Already at the Pirate Parlay Podcast. I'm your host, JC Allen. Sick Podcast Network. We're signing out of here. Peace. We're out.
See ya.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast Pirate Parlay on YouTube, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.